I'm Richard Moses from the Lower East Side Preservation Initiative, also known as LESPI, and I'm glad to welcome you to our webinar tonight, 90 Years of Terracotta on the Lower East Side, 1849 to 1939, with Susan Tunick. For those of you who aren't familiar with LESPI, we're a not-for-profit organization formed in 2007, whose mission is the preservation of the historic Lower East Side, which includes the East Village, Lower East Side below Houston Street, Chinatown, Little Italy, and the Bowery. We do this through education, outreach, and advocacy, primarily for New York City Landmarks Commission designated historic districts and individual landmarks. Along with preserving the area's beautiful historic architecture, we also push to help maintain the traditional culture and diversity of the Lower East Side, one of the most important historic areas of the city and the country due to the immigration, political, and artistic history. Now, during the lecture, please put any questions that you have in the Q&A that you should see at the bottom of your screen. We'll answer all questions at the end of the presentation, and we'll try to get to everybody's questions, but we may not be able to. So we'll do the best as you can here. We want to take a quick poll to see where everybody lives. Please answer, and don't worry, your answers are anonymous. So here goes. We'll give a minute or two to the poll, and then we'll continue from there. So 1 minute, please.
Richard?
Yeah.
I'm going to push share screen when you, in order to start.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, we're almost done here. I see this is a very fast crowd here. So, okay, we'll give it another 20 seconds, and then we'll announce the results here. Maybe we'll give it 10 seconds. Okay. Okay, so I think you all can see, where everybody is. Mostly New York City outside the Lower East Side, but we have a lot of Lower East Side people, tri-state area, US 10 or 11% each. And then we have a few people from outside the country, which is always fun to see. So thank you all for sharing that information with us. We always like to see that. And I'm now happy to introduce my fellow LESPI board member, Deborah Y., who's going to introduce our speaker for tonight, Susan.
It's a privilege to have Susan Tunick with us this evening to discuss terracotta, a material that most people have heard of, but wouldn't necessarily be able to identify. Susan is the president of the Friends of Terra Cotta, a national nonprofit organization, and also the author of several books on this subject, including the remarkable volume titled Terracotta Skyline. Susan discovered this material, which became a lifelong passion, by doing what a lot of us do, looking up at the buildings in her New York neighborhood. She became intrigued by their ornamentation, sometimes in a natural color or in other times brightly colored. That led her to investigate further. She found that what often appeared to be some kind of stone was actually a clay-based material, terracotta, which had become increasingly popular in the early 20th century as a building material for New York City apartments and skyscrapers. Perhaps the most well-known structure clad in terracotta is New York's beloved Woolworth Building. For over 35 years, Susan has advocated for the preservation of terracotta, always eager to educate the public about this facet of architecture that has so long fascinated her. Such a passion might not be a surprise when we learn that Susan is also a ceramic artist herself, creating mural projects in a Queens school and in a Brooklyn subway station, as well as freestanding sculptures that explore the artistic possibilities of this medium. Tonight, Susan Tunick turns her attention to terracotta found in buildings of the Lower East Side, which I'm sure will enrich all of us who walk these neighborhoods. Please welcome the very distinguished artist, author, and terracotta advocate, Susan Tunick.
Thanks. Okay, so I'm starting with the first image, which is a sheet music for the terracotta polka. Now it has lots of terracotta objects in it. You can see them all. And in fact, we will not be discussing this type of terracotta today. Rather, we'll be focusing on architectural terracotta. And the New York Times, May 14th, 1911, had an article called Architectural Terracotta, a Big Factor in New Building. It's a quote from it is, the New York skyline, which without exaggeration is most wonderful building district in the world, is more than half architectural terracotta, and yet not more than one lay mind in 1,000 appreciates this fact. And even some architects and builders, this truth comes as a surprise. Brick and stone, the average man would say. So today, I'm really hoping to give you a very brief overview of part of the making of terracotta, then look at some examples of ways of identifying it, because it is not easy to identify in certain situations, which we'll explore as we go along. And then I'd like to focus on a number of buildings in the Lower East Side. The term terracotta literally means burnt earth. It is a hard-baked, fine-grained product that is similar to brick, but is of a higher grade clay and is fired to approximately 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Could I have the next? Next, thanks. Traditionally, terracotta is made in plaster mold, and I'm showing you the simplest type of plaster mold. On the left is it would be a 5-part mold. The 5th piece is not visible so that we can see the inside of the mold from that drawing. If you look on the right, you can see a man actually putting together a plaster mold, and you can see where the blue arrow is a completed pressed clay mold. What's interesting and important to note is that it's basically hollow. You can see that there's a partition in the back, but terracotta blocks are intended to be hollow. It makes them lighter, obviously, easier to carry around in the factory, easier to install. And also there are anchors, which we will see that often there are holes in the back of the partitions. Next. Thanks. Here you see a mold on the left being taken apart. When clay is leather hard, which is moderately stiff, then it makes sense to take the piece out of the mold so that fine finishing can be done. And this mold on the left is very complex, and a lot of hand work will have to be done for undercuts. The mold in the drawing on the right just shows you the back with the partitions, and it's a much simpler form, which still would require a little bit of hand finishing, but a minimal amount. Next. Okay, I would really like you to see how the terracotta fits into a building. So on the left is an example from the Goubanier Hospital, which is on the Lower East Side, McKim Mead and White building. And you can see the brick backup wall and the terracotta in front. In the middle image, you can actually see where the blue arrow is, an anchor, a steel anchor that would be used to hook onto the piece of terracotta and into the back wall. Unfortunately, when terracotta was being introduced, there was no stainless steel. So these anchors are at risk of rusting over time when water, which inevitably gets into buildings that are especially not maintained, it becomes a real problem and can cause a lot of damage to the terracotta and brick. In the right image, you see a stainless steel anchor with the blue arrow pointing to it. And this is a modern repair on city center. And you'll actually see the damage where the piece is being replaced in another image. So you can keep that in mind. But pieces are anchored into back walls. And that's the basis of the way that terracotta is installed. Next. Okay, to identify terracotta, the easiest way, and actually it was mentioned by Deborah, is to recognize color. Paint is used, of course, on outsides of buildings, but it doesn't last, and terracotta has a different quality. In the glaze has a slight glassiness and surface. So when you're looking at buildings, if you see a building that seems to have multiple colors, there's a reasonable chance that it's terracotta. Next. Another important way of recognizing terracotta is through its crazed lines. Now, in the middle image, you're looking at a white glazed piece, and many buildings are glazed white. And you can see tiny network of lines. These are called crazing lines, and that will help you identify that it's a glaze with tiny crazes. The crazed lines are not a real problem. It's common in most or much terracotta. So that's not something to worry about, but it's helpful for identification. In the left image, if you look for crispness, which is a key element in terracotta. Terracotta doesn't deteriorate the way stone does. So if you look at the goat in the left image, you'll see how crisp it is, and particularly the shadow with the feet and the hooves. And below is a blue arrow that is pointing to brownstone. It's beginning to delaminate and come off the building in chunks. So the difference between terracotta and brownstone should generally be clear and obvious. The right image shows a piece, it's sort of a column cap with heads that is just melting away. It's not crisp anymore, and I think there's been some attempt at repairing it, but it's a wreck. So keep in mind crispness. Next. Okay, another approach to recognizing terracotta is to look closely. In the right side, we see the 63rd Street Y, and there are some small damages that you can see with the blue arrow. It's enough to even have a small area that's been chipped to be able to see that the material lying underneath the outside layer is different from the outside layer. Stone is uniform throughout. So if you have a chip in stone, it doesn't appear to be much different. The middle image is the piece at City Center that I was talking about. And you can see a really roughed up clay body. You'll also notice that it's hollow. There's a hole right through. If you ever see a hole through, you know it's hollow, you know it's terracotta. And the image on the left is a larger chunk that actually has little bits of different clay mixed in, and you can actually see some particles in it. So the minute you see a body beneath the surface, when there's a chip that has a certain kind of texture and graininess, that is often a good way to know that it's terracotta. Next. The last suggestion is that you really begin to look at joints at the size of a unit. And the units can be quite small, and you'll see the different joint lines. And when you see a number of joint lines, you can kind of guess that it's likely to be terracotta. The pieces tend to be considerably smaller than stone. And in this contemporary terracotta image on the left, the pieces are bigger, but there are lots and lots of joints, and you can begin to recognize those. And I will point this out through the rest of the talk, because It's not easy to grasp these different concepts all at once, but we're working on it. Okay, I would like the next slide, and I'm going to have to give you a little backstory. In 2000, Jay Shockley, who has worked for the research department of the Landmarks Commission, and I were asked to investigate for Cooper Union, the Cooper Union building, which is the 1850s building that is the famous Cooper Union building. And a very interesting and complex restoration was going on then, and there was the awareness that terracotta appeared to be on the building. It just didn't seem possible because we not aware that terracotta was being made as early as the 1850s. We knew 2 or 3 examples. That's it. But it turned out that this was original to the building, which led to a lot of research for the last 20 years and writing and articles about the early period of terracotta in the United States, American-made terracotta. It was a very short period from about 1849 to 1859, approximately. And we have begun to collect a number of buildings, quite a few in the New York area that have still extant early terracotta. So it was exciting when we discovered that the Norfolk Synagogue had terracotta ornament on it. This building opened in 1850, and it is now the oldest surviving synagogue building in the city. At its completion, it was the largest synagogue in the United States and could hold about 1,200 people. The congregation was primarily German, and the architect was German-born Alexander Salzer. You'll see that information on the next image. Its Gothic style was inspired by the monumental Cologne Cathedral. Pointed arch windows and doorways dominate the facade, framed at the top by a pointed gable. Octagonal pyramids, which you can see in the drawing, originally capped the towers of this stuccoed brick building. Let's go to the next image. And I just want to let you know that the building is a landmark. It was sold in 1986 and has become a foundation which allows weddings and lectures and exhibits. Unfortunately, the building is in not good shape. As you can see, this facade would be a good study for who wants pink or red on their facade, because there's so many different colors. One thing that's important is that the congregation, which is small, still continues to meet weekly in the basement. The blue arrow is pointing to the doorway, and above the doorway, next image, you will have a chance to see some of the terracotta ornament, which is very Gothic in feeling. And the slide on the left is another section that has peeled, and you can see the clay body through. You don't get to see it roughed up the way you do when you see a chip like we've looked at before, but you can see the surface, and the surface is clay. That is for sure. So it was exciting to discover this, but we actually do not have any information at this time on who would have made the clay. Maybe in the future we will find out. So now I want to switch. I'm doing a little switching around here because I had so many things I was trying to share with you. So I wanted to share synagogues. I wanted to share a lot of different stuff. But one thing that's really important is a new book that came out called The Decorated Tenement. And I know that some members of the Lower East Side group have heard Zach Violet talk about his book. And it's full of good information. And I just wanted to quote one thing from it that is very important in relation to tenements. The widespread use of architectural ornament in varying styles and degrees had been standard practice among the city's builders for more than a generation. But in general, it had been used in ways that reflect and reinforce the occupant's position within the social and economic hierarchy. Buildings with more ornament were associated with wealthy and powerful institutions, while those with less or none were associated with the poor or working class. And this notion is turned on its head by the immigrants who came to the US. And you'll see that as we go on. But it's an interesting and important notion. Next image. And I'm backing up to all the way back to 1824. This may be the earliest purpose-built tenement. It's certainly the earliest that survived, but it may have been the first one that was built. It's very simple, as you can see, no ornament. And it's an example of what reformers believed that tenement design should be like. They emphasize the ideas of thrift and simplicity. They considered those the values that the working class should embrace. And that's a key point. Next image. We're going to jump a bunch of years, yes, and look at this I call it, to me, it's dignified, a dignified, simple apartment building that's in the 1867. And the ornament on it is iron. You can tell from the slide on the right, which has a little bit of rust. And I was looking at it earlier today when my PowerPoint opened for me and realized that the rust may also be from the fire escape. The black image in this slide is the fire escape. So in any case, we do know that this is iron. And I'd like you to look at the size of the entire unit above the window. No joints. Okay, it just wouldn't be terracotta because you need joints in something this size. So this is a good example to keep in mind about that particular way of identifying terracotta. Next. So I'm jumping back to a synagogue, mostly because this chronologically is as early a building that I know of that the Herder brothers did. It's really magnificent in a lot of ways. And I do just have to say that Roberta Gratz undertook what we call the Eldritch Street project. In the 70s, this was in terrible disrepair, and she was determined to save it. She is a journalist, a preservationist, author, and she proceeded to succeed in raising money with a lot of help over a lot of years. And the building is open, it's beautiful, it's in wonderful condition now, and it's to be admired and appreciated. So this is one of the most glorious examples. The Herder brothers were German Protestant immigrants, and they built over 50 tenements in the Lower East Side and other buildings such as the synagogue. They had studied architecture before they came to the US, and this is important in relation to tenements and ornament. And the Eldritch Street Synagogue is the nation's first great house of worship constructed by the Eastern European Jews. They were quite distinct and separate from the German Jews who had come a little bit earlier. It continues to carry out an unbroken century-old tradition of Sabbath services, which are, I don't know if they're held upstairs, they're probably downstairs, but I'm not sure. The next image is also of Eldridge Street. Next, please. And these 5 windows represent the 5 books of Moses. I'd like you to notice above each of the arches is a little Jewish star with little balls around it. And this ornament appears a lot in the Herder brothers' work. You also should notice that there are marble columns, the shiny columns on either end of this group of windows that are marble. You have brick from the building facade. You have the terracotta, and above, just below the windows is a band of stone. And if you look at it, you'll see two things: beginning deterioration. It sort of has lines, and maybe it's beginning to delaminate, and also large units. There are very few joints, so the units are large. So those are things to keep in mind when you're thinking about looking at buildings and identifying the materials. Next. This is the same year Herder Brothers did this really fun tenement. And one thing that's important is that in the US, multifamily dwellings were late in coming. In Europe, it was very common to have advanced types of multifamily housing, and it wasn't considered foreign or unsavory. But believe it or not, in 1884, 2 years before this went up, the Real Estate Record and Building Guide claimed that the decorated tenement was, quote, the most vulgar type of building in the civilized world, and for that matter, more vulgar than any type of building in the uncivilized world. Well, we have a difference of opinion. I think this is quite civilized myself. What I really want to point out is, of course, the wonderful aliveness of the head in the right screen, and how he's sort of tucked into this very elaborate metal cornice. If you take a look at the arrow in the right screen, you'll see a version of an image that's used repeatedly in terracotta by the Herder brothers. It's sort of a face with a sort of shell and scroll, and you'll see a good detail of that. On the left, you can see where this image is located. There are actually 4 in this row, 2 in the row above, and 2 high up near the head. Also, you'll see the Jewish star surrounded by little balls that we did see a version of in the Eldritch Synagogue. Note that it's in a square plaque, because you're going to see it again in a moment, and it will be in a slightly different surround. Next, please. Okay, so here on the right, you get a circular version of the balls and the Jewish star, and 4 little ones surrounding that. Just for practice sake, take a look at the bottom of the screen where you have stone. It's a kind of a tan color, not reddish. You have 1 joint. If you take a look at the circle that surrounds the star and count the joints, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 joints. That's the kind of difference that we see in stone and terracotta. Also, just notice the bottom band that's ornamental terracotta, because it will come up again in a minute. The heads that we looked at previously are in all of these many arches, and we'll look at a detail of that. Nearly 90% of all tenements in the Lower East Side, and nearly 97% of the more ornate buildings, were built by immigrants and their children. And the increase in industrial production of architectural ornament helped to make the decorated tenement possible. So we saw that by 1867, iron was being introduced as ornament, and later, except for the early period, the second period was really 1880s. So you're seeing the second phase. Next image. Richard, can I have the next image?
Okay, it's not wanting to move for some reason. Hold on.
Okay.
Let's see. All right, let's try share again. Sorry.
Okay.
It would not forward, so I don't know what the story was on that.
You want me to hit share screen?
No, I have to do it from here.
Okay.
Oh, sorry everybody for this plethora of issues here. Let's see. I think this was where we were. Yeah, this is where we were. Okay, now we'll try next again. Aha.
Next. Okay. We do apologize. Okay, this is the head that you've been seeing so far, and you'll continue to see that's being used in a lot of the Herder Brothers buildings. I did want to point out that as any architect knows, the final touches of a building depend on the installers. And if you look at the two little pyramids on the left of the screen and the flower motif between them, you'll know that a mason could have cut it so it would be symmetrical, but didn't bother. And so you notice those little details as you look closely, and you will see these two details of the pyramid and the floral motif again in the Herder Brothers building. It's one of the benefits of terracotta is that it's mold made, and molds can be used quite a number of times. You can put different clay bodies in the mold at different times. And so it's economically very logical to repeat motifs that can be just press molded. You don't need to start from scratch with sculpture. So that is something that comes up a great deal. And it's a benefit of terracotta. Next. Thank you. This is a little bit later, and it's the last of the Herder Brothers images that we're going to look at. But I wanted to point out again, in the arches where the windows are, you're going to see the same head. The details at the very bottom on the right, you can actually see one pyramid and the two florals. So those will keep coming up. And yet the uniqueness of the face, which you can see on the left screen, the arrow points to where it's placed on the building, with this very wild look, crazy teeth, not very many, lots of curves and curls and activity in the beard. And then you can compare it with the part of the window spandrel right to the left that's much flatter and much lower relief.
Yeah.
And they're both terracotta, but the variation is phenomenal. You'll notice the marble columns which come in again. And I don't know if this is stone in the just above the blue frame that's wood of the window, there's stone, but I don't know if it's rusticated or if in fact it's failing. So we'll say it's rusticated. Okay. I wanted to just mention to you that the cost of ornament compared to other construction expenses was relatively modest. For example, in a building that cost $20,000 to $30,000, you might spend 4% of the total cost on building ornament. And that really is modest. The next image. Thank you. This is the only reference to a terracotta company that either Zach or I found. It says Boston Terracotta Company. And there was evidently an 1893 building where there was a fire and the lawsuit resulted. And by June 1900, the lawsuit was published in Real Estate Record and Builder's Guide, and you get a breakdown of a lot of the materials. The total of these materials was about $45,000 for the building. And we don't know how much terracotta was on it because we don't know the building and the fire, but $1,800 was spent on the terracotta, almost the same amount for the elevators, $15,500 for the masonry work. So it's a modest expense to add ornament. And that's really something that's worth recognizing. Next, please. This has been really fun for me, these two buildings, because even today I discovered another difference between them. But the first difference was that one's called Lincoln and one's called Garfield. They're both by Alexander Finkel, who studied in Paris. I thought they were identical. And then after a lot of hard looking, I realized that they're not completely identical. There are different, the second floor window arches have different motifs, and also below the windows are different motifs, but they both are using tile in the same kind of way. It's not exactly the same though. So we'll look at the next image and we can see that in more detail. Okay, so when I said it's not exactly the same, the Madison Building has actually cream, I guess, mustard colored tiles and terracotta colored tiles in between. Here, you're just seeing a background of terracotta colored tiles. So you have the plain glazed tile, and then you have above it colored tiles, blue and white, and then multicolored. These tiles are all called encaustic tiles. They're made by inlaying one clay into another, the white clay inlaid into the blue. And they're very often used for floors because they wear very well. There's no glaze to be lost when there's foot traffic. So it's wonderful to see them. I would say there are probably 3 or 4 buildings in the Lower East Side with tile of this nature, and maybe 3 or 4 in the East Village. The other things I wanted to point out are the window inset, which is metal. If you look at it, it's hard for me to explain, but it doesn't feel like terracotta, and it appears to have paint on it, but it's clearly metal. What's nice to see is that the arch around it is stone in good shape, and there's very few joints. If you look on the left side, you'll see just 2 joints. It's 3 pieces again. I found the terracotta capital on this marble pilaster and the terracotta head, the little angel head, to be really different from other terracotta. And I don't know who made it. It's rather crude. And interestingly enough, when you think about the heads that we've seen before, the head with the beard, the head with the teeth, the funny teeth, they're very lively. And this angel is very static. It would be something that you would expect to see on a gravestone in New England or something. And I'm going to try to look into it more because it's really surprising to see this kind of work. My guess is that it was a new sculptor or an old New England sculptor. I don't know, but I'm hoping to find out more about it over time. So after this, we can go to the next image. Okay, this is the beginning of the end, the beginning of the demise of the decorated tenement, which came quickly in the first decade of the 20th century. I particularly like this building because it so clearly shows that this building has bathrooms. The oval windows, which you can see with the blue arrow and in detail, are the sign that this 1902 building followed the tenement law, which was a 1901 tenement law. This law required landlords to provide cold water inside each apartment. There had to be a sink, which could also double as a bathtub. 2 toilets had to be shared in the hallway for 4 different apartments per floor. So this is a giant change from going out to a hand pump in the backyard and the outhouses. And it really changed the situation. The new laws were also required. I mean, rent regulations and strict building codes were applied retroactively to the 19th century structures. This, of course, meant that there was an increase in expenses for landlords, causing the value of the tenements to really decrease. And older tenement buildings began to lose residents as standards of living improved. So the last tenement that went up and was built by European immigrants was the Marans Court, which was completed in 1913. So from the new law tenement, 1901 to 1913, a pretty short span, the tenement becomes much less valuable and people are moving out. Next, please. I wanted to leave tenements just so we could look at 1 or 2 other building types. The Forward Building on East Broadway is a wonderful example. It's a landmark, and East Broadway was once known as the Yiddish newspaper row. This building has the entire inset. After you see the windows on the sides with tan, which is brick, is terracotta. There's some very nice color in the section above the doorway, and you can see the carving in the stone where it says brick, it says the Forward Building. Also, there are 4 rondelles, which you can see right near. One of them is highlighted with a blue arrow, that were 4 socialist heroes, including Engels and Marx. So the building actually remained in the hands of the Forward until 1974. And then they moved uptown, and in 2001, a Chinese developer turned this landmark building into 39 condo apartments. So it's safe and occupied. We kind of keep that in mind for our buildings. Next. I love this view on Canal Street. Here's this tiny little whitish building, which really is not at all tiny. It is a theater by Thomas Lamb that goes way back and has a large theater and auditorium behind the facade. It's a 1926 building. It certainly isn't sharing any of the Art Deco or modern details that come a little later. But most interesting is that you walk by, and if you know that this was a theater, you say, it's a movie theater. Why are there 3 enormous Palladian windows? But in fact, they're faux windows. This is, the black is just black terracotta. So here's an example of terracotta mimicking glass. And we'll look at another example next. 2 more examples of how terracotta can mimic other materials, which I have mentioned to you earlier, and which makes it hard to identify. So the lowest section where the arrow is on the left is stone, it's granite. Above, everything else is terracotta. And you can check it out partly by looking at how many joints there are, but it's got a glaze called Granitex, which is intended to match stone, and it does a pretty good job of that. There are also crazed lines, which are hard to see in this slide, that would help you identify that there's a glaze on the work and it is not stone. On the right were two buildings that abutted, and I just photographed a section of the two. And on the right is a terracotta building with a very nice textured glaze. And on the left is two panels of black enameled metal. So it can be tricky. And that's why I've emphasized certain clues that might make it easier for you to recognize. Of course, the best thing to do is be out on the street and look and touch things. And it's something we're not doing right now. We're being virtual and technologically challenged. Could I have the next slide? This is the last building that we're going, or set of buildings that we'll look at. This is the East River Track House. And you're seeing it with the FDR Drive in front of it. It was constructed along with four other buildings in 1938 to 1940. And it's a very nice example of a kind of an Art Deco, WPA modern treatment. The terracotta is running just below the roof. There's a whole band, which you'll see a better image of in a minute. And this concern, because as everybody's aware, we have to face the problems of water and flooding. And there's a lot of effort being made to consider what to do along the East River. And there's concern that these buildings, which are important, and could I have the next slide? You'll see the second building that survives. It's a very sweet comfort station. It has bands of terracotta near, maybe sky blue with stars just below the roof. And the doorways are surrounded with terracotta that's polychromed. Women and men are also in terracotta. Let's get the next slide, because then we can just point out that this is the different view of the first building we looked at, the one that's on the FDR Drive. This is the side that faces the East River. And this is one of a group of pictures that I took in the mid-90s when I was looking at lots of terracotta. And interestingly, the doors, which we are guessing were bronze, are no longer on the building, but the terracotta panel underneath the windows is very nice. It's polychrome, and if everything continues to work, you'll see it in color in a minute. And you can see the kind of Greek key motif that is along the band below the roof. And that's what I was pointing out in a distant view in the slide that we saw from the FDR Drive. So the Lower East Side initiative has reached out to the National Register, and now these two buildings are eligible for the National Register, which is really terrific. And we hope that they will have a long, good future. We will see. One thing that has interested me very much about these buildings is that the terracotta was made by a company where I don't know of any other exterior extant examples. It was the Eastern Terracotta Company. Next slide. And they were in operation for a short period based in Old Bridge, New Jersey. But the people who were running it came from the New York Architectural Terracotta Company that had failed. Here is an image of the book that actually records these buildings that Eastern was going to make. So they've got all of the details for it. And it seems like the president of the Borough of Manhattan and the Department of Borough Works office were the group that was behind this originally. I'm going to end with a ridiculous slide. if it comes on. Next slide. Yes, here we have 165 Ludlow Street with no terracotta, no stone, but a trompe-l'oeil facade, which is quite a wreck, but I thought is really fun to look at. So I would now be happy to try to answer some questions. And I think that's what Richard is going to follow up with.
Yes, yes. And let me just share the screen here. Stop sharing and then share again and see if this works. Never a dull moment here with the.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's see if this works now. Before we start on questions, I want to just say real quickly that first of all, Susan, thank you so much for your presentation. It was really so phenomenal. And I want to say about the buildings in the East River Park that you had just been talking about as being eligible for the National Register. We at LESPE have been really pushing the city administration to save these buildings, and it's been a real struggle. We actually had a call with the Parks Department yesterday about this and trying to see if they could be saved. They're now slated for demolition as part of the East Side Coastal Resiliency Project, which is going to raise the park up 9 feet in the air and provide a barrier for future flooding. And we would like them to move them to a new position, which is not as crazy as it sounds. I know a lot of you are scratching your head, but moving buildings like this has been done for well over a century, and it's not really a big deal. So stay tuned. We have on our website a letter that you can send. If you press a button on our homepage, you can send a letter to the city saying, please save these buildings. Oh no, actually I'm misspeaking here. Sorry, that you can sign our petition, and soon we'll be doing a letter writing campaign. So keep your eyes open. And the other thing I want to mention while I'm on the topic of saving buildings is that the wonderful examples that Susan just showed of terracotta on the Lower East Side really is all very much in danger of being taken down by developers. The Lower East Side, is a hot area for redevelopment. The developers are really salivating to get at these buildings and take them down. And we've proposed a landmark district below Delancey Street down to Canal that is now being reviewed by the Landmarks Commission, has actually been being reviewed by the Landmarks Commission for about 6 years now. And we're trying to get them to hurry, but it's a painfully slow process. So please keep your eyes peeled for news from us, and if you can, to sign petitions or send letters, that kind of thing is very much appreciated. So let me try to share the screen again now. Oh, here we go. This is nice. So Susan had mentioned that we would see the polychrome terracotta in the East River buildings in color and emitted, and here it is, sure enough. So let me see if I can now get to the questions. It's given me very little access to actually do things here. Here we go. Okay. Someone earlier on wrote, has the figure on 375 Broom Street been identified?
No, no.
Okay.
These are generic, and it's very rare that anything's identified in the terracotta until you have a building owner who decides to put his head or his sons on the building. We don't have much ID.
And this I guess is probably the same answer as the Herder brothers. Who is the face in the shell with the scroll supposed to be or symbolize?
Yeah, we don't know. To me, it looks like an African face, but that's, just up to one's judgment. It's very rare that you would see something of this nature and be able to identify it.
Yes. Okay. Let's see here. Yeah, I have limited control here if I don't show the screen like this. So do the balls surrounding the stars in the Herder Brother buildings, the Jewish stars in the Herder Brother buildings, have some symbolic meaning?
Oh, I would have to say that I don't I don't think so, but I'm not at all versed in Jewish iconography, so I can't say for sure. I'm sorry. I'm coming up with no, 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 no. You know?
Well, at least you're not making stuff up, so that's
Right. Oh yeah, right. I could have done that.
Yeah. Richard, could I sneak in a question here?
sure, of course.
Susan, I wondered, would the building owners choose the ornamentation from a catalog? How?
Yeah. Yes. You certainly could choose it from a catalog. All of the companies did have catalogs. Not that there are so many surviving, but there are a number. You also might have, see, if you had an architect for your building, and this is highly unlikely with the tenements, the architect might be providing the ornament drawings, which would then be created by the sculptor for the particular building. So buildings are very often customized if there's an architect. But because these are early, I think most were chosen from catalogs.
Okay, what components of the Cooper Union building are terracotta?
Okay, there are a number of arches, keystones to arches and arches that are in various places in the building. And what's so peculiar is that one arch will have a terracotta keystone, the next arch will have a stone keystone. There's a lack of continuity and logic. And we've tried to look back, and we know that there were building strikes. We know that some of the terracotta came at different times from other. So it may be that, they took what was available and put it in. And that's very surprising. It's all painted, and all of the early terracotta from the 1850s was touted by the terracotta companies as takes paint better than wood. So it was expected to be painted to match whatever other elements were in the building. That was a standard.
What happened to the molds used? Did Herder Brothers design their own molds, and are they still extant?
Yeah, well, in fact, the question that Deborah asked about stock items is relevant. Generally, let's say those balls that maybe were designed by the Herder Brothers were made into molds. Let's say that was customized. And the molds are plaster. They're good for maybe 40 or 50 pressings. But then you need to remake it because they lose some of their sharpness. The plaster starts to wear a little. The molds usually are put into a great, big, huge field called, the graveyard. And lots of different things go there. But certainly the molds end up kind of out of doors with rain pouring down because they are no longer crisp after they're used many times.
And does anyone manufacture them today? I guess meaning molds and terracotta.
Sure. Terracotta is manufactured by a number of companies. We have two primary companies in the US, one on the East Coast and one on the West Coast. And we also have a company in England. There's companies in Italy and Spain. Everyone's doing, interesting work. And some people are using the traditional plaster molds. But there's also a lot of other methods for making terracotta. So there are other kinds of molds, but a lot of the new buildings that we see are using terracotta that's extruded. It's coming out of a machine that's pushing it in a particular shape or pattern. If you try to picture that you wanted round terracotta and you squeezed a toothpaste tube, you'd get a round extrusion of toothpaste. Well, that's the same concept as an extruder. You would put on it not a round hole, but you'd put on it a different shape hole so that the piece that's extruded comes out with a certain kind of shape. That does not require molds. It's less expensive, and it's used a great deal now for terracotta rain screen, which is a variation of terracotta that's simpler. Anything that comes out of an extruder has to have decoration that's going in a linear way, because that's what's going to be extruded. So it's limited in the ornament and in the relief that you can get.
What are the ways to tell the difference between cast stone and unglazed terracotta?
Okay, that's a good question, and cast stone can be a little bit tricky. It's unglazed terracotta has a surface. I would say that it's absorbs light in a different way. You have to think, let's say, of black satin and black velvet. One reflects light and one sort of absorbs it. The terracotta tends to absorb light, particularly unglazed. And cast stone tends to have sometimes little bits of shiny material in it, mica, and it is more likely to reflect the light and not, and look a little shiny. But that is a difficult question to answer without having samples. So that's about the best I can do. Come on a walk and I'll show you.
This question you partially answered or maybe completely answered, but I'll say it anyways. Is there any new construction using terracotta? You mentioned the rain screens.
Oh yeah, there's a ton of new construction. In fact, sad to say that one of the most giant super talls in New York on 57th Street that's still being completed is using terracotta on one whole side. And I'm really worried about it, because I think that swaying is inevitable in this giant, extremely skinny building. It's where the Steinway building is. It's an addition to it, and for a time it was called the Steinway Tower. Right now it doesn't seem to have a name, but terracotta is used there. There's a new huge, again, not super tall, but giant. It's One Vanderbilt Place is all terracotta, completely clad in terracotta. There are dozens of projects going on all around the city. One of the best architects using terracotta today is Annabelle Seldorf, who's got very handsome glazed terracotta colored buildings in different parts of the city. So lots of going on, not just in New York. England is flooded with fabulous new terracotta buildings. They're smaller and they're much more luscious. The glazes are outrageous and so on. Yeah, lots of activity.
And we're jumping around a little bit here, but
well, we've done some jumping tonight. It's okay.
Yeah. Did the Herder brothers have any relationship to the Herders who did furniture?
No, they are unconnected. And I would have liked to remember to mention that. I didn't.
And here's a question that I can answer. Will this presentation be available to watch again online? If not, that's understandable. This presentation was exquisite, which I have to second that. And thank you for that remark. Yes, this will be posted on YouTube. We usually get it up within a few days, certainly within a week. And we have a Lesby YouTube channel. Again, if you go into our oh, no, it's not forwarding here for some reason. Let's see if I do this. Okay, here we go. If you go into our website, which you can see on the lower left, www.lesby-nyc.org, you'll see a link to our YouTube site where we have several of our previous webinars on various Lower East Side related topics posted. So you can watch those in their entirety right now, if you're up for another webinar. And those are free of technical glitches because they've all been edited out. You'll see, if you watch this one again, you'll see it's magically free of technical glitches due to my sharp editing skills. And so, yes, it will be up certainly within a week. And We also have future events coming up. May is Lower East Side History Month. And so we have a bunch of coming up. The one that's coming up soonest is on Tuesday. We have a virtual walking tour of the Yiddish Theater district, which is really 2nd Avenue and the East Village these days. We'll be walking around talking about the old Yiddish theaters that graced the avenue back in the decades around the turn of the 20th century. So we're very excited about that. And we'll have future events. If you're not on our mailing list, you should try to get on it. Again, you could do it through our website, www.lesby-nyc.org, because we have a lot of events. A lot of them are for free, and they're quite interesting. And so you can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter to keep up with the latest news on Lower East Side preservation and actions that we ask people to take if you're up for taking actions to try to save a building or save a historic area. We always welcome participation in that way. And these social media sites are really great ways to stay in touch with the news on almost a daily basis. And finally, please consider making a donation today to LESB if you can, again, through our website, on our homepage, or through the email invitation that you got to this event. You could see where to donate. We really rely on donations both for our advocacy, our advocacy work, as well as keeping these webinars going. It does cost money to have these Zoom subscriptions and keep our organization running strong. So if you can donate, please consider doing so. And I want to thank Susan and Friends of Terra Cotta again for a magnificent presentation. So we're so honored to have her with us tonight, and really was thrilling for us. And I want to thank you all, the audience, for attending as well, and thank you for our for your patience with all of these kind of tricky, crazy situations that came up. So again, thank you, and have a good night.
Thanks. Okay. Good.
That was so great, Susan. Thank you.
Oh, I'm glad, and thanks for your sweet introduction. That was really lovely. I am just mystified by the fact that the PowerPoint didn't open. It's crazy.
No.
You know, I don't know if we're actually I don't know if we are actually live right now. So maybe
Okay.
I could give you both a call if you like. And
Yeah, no,
Okay.
no,
Let's just say good night. Yeah, I just wanted to thank you so much.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great to meet you.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Thank
Thank you.
So Richard, on our Zoom tomorrow for HGC.
Oh, wow.
Bye.
All right. Well, thank you so much again,
Sure.
Susan, really.
Okay. Bye.
Thank you.